Today's case is being narrated by the brilliant channel Forgotten Lives, so sit back as Forgotten Lives takes us to 20th century South America.
Genaro Ortiz was born in 1901 in Galicia in northwest Spain. He lived with his mother and sister in a small town in the Galician countryside. He experienced a difficult childhood in which his father was largely absent. His mother tried to provide as best she could for her children. She made sure that they went to school and received some education. Genaro knew that his mother struggled and was determined to improve his family circumstances. He had often walked past the large houses and seen the rich and affluent people going out in their motor cars, even though at the time, people still travelled mainly by horse and cart. As soon as he was able, he left school and started work. However, Spain was going through a period of economic hardship. Wages were low, and it was very difficult for anyone like Genaro who did not possess any qualifications to improve their situation. In the early 20th century, many young Spanish people emigrated to North, South and Central America, settling in the great colonial cities once owned by Spain, such as Buenos Aires, Caracas, Bogota and Lima. They believed that they would be able to find better opportunities there. Genaro decided that he too should go to Latin America, and by 1929 he had saved enough money to make the journey. He then boarded a transatlantic liner bound for Argentina. During the journey, he became acquainted with another young Spanish man by the name of Marcelino Dominguez. He had also planned to make a new life in Buenos Aires, and they soon became friends. The two men had much in common. Both were brought up in poor families in rural Galicia, and like many before them, were hoping to make their fortune in Argentina. Genaro was quite tall, he had dark hair and piercing green eyes. Back in Galicia, he was always considered to be very handsome. He dressed immaculately with smart suits, and people always found it hard to believe that he had come from such a humble background. He knew how important it was that he should always try to be elegantly dressed if he was able to move in higher social circles. Unfortunately, when he arrived to Buenos Aires, he didn't find the work opportunities he was expecting. In 1913, Argentina was the world's 10th wealthiest country per capita, but since the end of the First World War, the economy had started to decline. Nevertheless, Genaro found work as a silver service waiter at a very elegant coffee house in the affluent city district. He was a very good waiter, and the female customers often commented on his outstanding service. However, in search of more income, he moved from the coffee house to work in a casino. By now, he had managed to establish a comfortable life for himself. He lived in lodgings that he shared with a young man who he had met on his journey from Spain, Marcelino Dominguez. But despite the fact that he was working and living in far better circumstances than he had been whilst growing up, this was not the life he had dreamt of and the life he had travelled across the ocean for. Every day, he witnessed the wealth of some of the regular visitors to the casino. They would often lose more money in one night than he earned in a month. He had spent his childhood looking at the big houses of the rich Galicians, and he was now serving the most affluent residents of Buenos Aires. Genaro wanted to experience that type of lifestyle. On one particular day, there was a group of Peruvian tourists playing at the roulette table and talking about the beautiful city of Lima, its wonderful buildings and tree-lined boulevards. Genaro thought that it sounded like the perfect place. He told his friend Marcelino, and the pair made plans to travel there to see the city and try and take advantage of what they hoped would be better working opportunities. They soon left their work in the casino and started to make their way to Lima. It was going to be a long trip, over 4,000 kilometers. As they traveled to Peru, they stopped in Bolivia. They needed more money in order to be able to continue to pay for their journey. They found work in a La Paz casino. Here again, Genaro saw the wealthy residents of the city living the life that he so much desired. He worked hard, and although anxious to become wealthy, his friend Marcelino was more ambitious and more impatient to get the money he needed to improve his life. He decided that in order to supplement his income, he would rob a jewelry shop. However, following the robbery, the police were informed that the likely suspects were two Spanish men who had recently arrived in the city and worked in the casino. The pair then left Bolivia and made their way to Peru. They arrived in Lima on the 20th of June 1930 and were immediately impressed by just how magnificent the city was, with the beautiful colonial buildings and the grand houses that were once the homes of rich merchants and Spanish officials, many who had previously ruled the country and extracted so much wealth and gold. Lima at one time was the capital of the South American Spanish Empire and had enjoyed the richness of architecture that had been financed by the profits of Peru's many mines and fertile agricultural lands. On their arrival, they were advised where the best place to stay was and decided to lodge at the Hotel Comercio, which was on the corner of Calle Girón Carabaist and Calle Girón and Cash. The hotel was simple, but in an excellent location. It had a lovely courtyard and patio in the centre. They were given room number 89, which was on the 3rd floor. The hotel itself was right next to the government building and near the station, so everything they needed was in walking distance. As soon as they settled in, they began to get to know the city and find out the places that would be the best to meet other people and to get ideas of where they could work. As they walked around, young ladies would gaze at them admiringly. They were both very handsome and dressed in the best suits. They noticed that they seemed to be getting quite a bit of attention from society ladies and wondered if they each may be able to marry one of the daughters of a wealthy Lima resident. Genaro and Marcelino knew the importance of looking their best, and they allocated some of their income to buy elegant clothes and accessories. They did this as they believed it enabled them to move in higher circles despite their humble social class. They would always look good and try to copy the latest styles from Paris. They also visited jewelers and tried to buy elegant looking watches. They still had some money left from their work in Buenos Aires, but with their expensive lifestyle, it soon started to run out. They had not yet found employment, and Genaro was particularly anxious as his savings were quickly diminishing. With this financial pressure, Genaro and Marcelino started to argue about money. On the 24th of June, one argument became particularly heated, as Marcelino had refused to share the profit he had obtained from robbing a jewelry shop in Bolivia. The next morning, the 25th of June, Genaro started looking for new lodgings. He saw an advertisement in the newspaper for a room that was available in a house belonging to the Buendia family. He decided to take a look, so he made his way to the house that was located at 356 Calle Conchan. Miss Esther Buendia opened the door, and in front of her she saw a young handsome Spanish man who told her that he was new to the city and was looking forward to a new life in Lima. Strangely, he did not tell her his name. She was immediately captivated by his charm and elegant appearance. The accommodation offered was quite simple, as was the house in general, but it was nice, and Genaro said he would like to take the room. Seemingly overwhelmed by the young Spanish gentleman, she did not ask for any references. Miss Buendia just gave him a key to the house and a key to the room. He then went back to the hotel where he was staying with his friend Marcelino. By now, it was late, and Marcelino was asleep. The following morning he took his things to his new lodgings. He had with him two large and seemingly heavy suitcases. Strangely, he did not stay to unpack. Instead, he left them in the room, locked his door, and made his way out of the house, saying goodbye to Miss Buendia as he went. He was, in fact, trying to get a false documentation and a false Chilean passport. A few days later, once Genaro got his false passport, he left Lima and traveled to the city of Guayaquil in Ecuador. He was using his newly acquired false Chilean passport with the name Juan Bautista Araya Guerrero. On the 1st of July at about 6 p.m, Mr. Buendia was sitting at the table with his family. He was about to have his dinner when he noticed an awful pungent smell emanating from one of the rooms. On closer inspection, it was the room that was occupied by the young handsome Spanish man, Genaro Ortiz, which he had moved into the previous week on the 25th of June. Mr. Buendia wondered what it could be, and so he contacted the police. They quickly arrived and broke the lock in order to enter the room. It was dark and empty, the curtains were drawn, and the bed had not been slept in. They noticed 2 large suitcases on the floor. They were both slightly damaged and looked like they had been used a lot. They were also completely full, and the smell was coming from them. The police then opened the suitcases and were confronted with a horrifying sight of a dismembered body. The police asked who had been renting the room, but Miss Esther Buendia had failed to take any details or references. She did, however, remember that the gentleman had said he had been staying in the Hotel Comercio. When the police arrived at the hotel and described a young, handsome, immaculately dressed Spanish man, the owner instantly knew who they were referring to. He told them that 2 young gentlemen had checked in on the 20th of June. He then took them to room number 89. It was on the 3rd floor. The police searched the room for any clues, and although it was very clean and everything looked in order, there were traces of blood and small bone fragments found. Undoubtedly, this was the place where Marcelino Dominguez had been killed and dismembered. News of the crime soon spread across the city, and it became the main story in all of the papers, not only in Peru, but throughout Latin America. People started to gather outside the hotel, seemingly getting some sort of macabre pleasure by looking at the place where this terrible crime had happened. Hotel bookings also increased, as there were those who wanted to stay in the now famous location, but only a few would stay on the 3rd floor, and few would have wanted to spend a night in room number 89. Then a new team of special detectives were given the responsibility of solving this terrible crime. The hotel owner gave the police the name of Genaro Ortiz, and officials at Lima docks believed that he may have boarded a boat to Ecuador using the name Juan Bautista Araya Guerrero. The police didn't waste any time, and an inspector immediately contacted the Ecuadorian embassy to ask them to arrange that their authorities arrest the passenger, Senor Juan Bautista Araya Guerrero, when his ship arrived in Guayaquil. However, this was not passed on to the port customs officers, and on arrival in Ecuador, he was not apprehended. Genaro saw the newspapers and realized that he was a wanted man, so he decided to leave the country. He then secured passage on a boat traveling to Panama. During this voyage, and unbeknown to Genaro, the news about the horrific crime had reached colossal proportions, not only in Peru and Chile, but all over Latin America. It was headline news everywhere. Of course, the press embellished the story. It seemed that everyone wanted to read about the handsome young Spanish man who it was believed was responsible for murdering his friend and leaving his dismembered body in a suitcase at a boarding house in Lima. The boat arrived on the 10th of July 1930, but officials in Panama were waiting for him, and he was apprehended. When he was searched, the police found some of the stolen jewels from Bolivia on his possession. He was arrested and placed in jail until the documentation was completed for his transfer back to Peru. He was then accompanied on board the steamship Aconcagua. The ship arrived on the 6th of August at the Callao Navy dock in Lima, where thousands of people had gathered to try and get a glimpse of the now famous young Spaniard who had been nicknamed the Hotel Comercio Ripper. The police had implemented many security measures to try and stop the crowds getting close to the suspect. However, 4 teenage girls who were so captivated by his good looks managed to break through the police cordon and went up to Genaro. They told him they did not believe the stories they had read, and one gave him a medal of Saint Teresa, telling him that it was for good luck. Once he was placed in a transport vehicle, another lady climbed onto the bonnet of the car to send him good wishes. As the car advanced, it could only move slowly, as the streets were filled with so many onlookers. His picture again appeared in every newspaper, and the crime allegedly committed by the handsome Spanish man seemed to be the only thing that people were talking about all over the country. It soon became apparent that most of the women in Lima were in denial about Genaro's crime and were in favour of a pardon. It was as if he had cast a spell on them. Despite this, the evidence against Genaro Ortiz was overwhelming, and he never denied killing his friend Marcelino Dominguez. When questioned in court as to what was his motive, he calmly replied, "I am at the mercy of God. What is done is done." Genaro Ortiz was found guilty and sentenced to 25 years in prison. He was sent to the Lima penitentiary and was placed in cell number 85, which he later decorated with yellow wallpaper and magazine cutouts. Although as the years passed, many people forgot about Genaro Ortiz, there were some who did not, and every week women left small gifts for him at the prison gates. One visitor was Miss Tula, an apparent Chilean acquaintance of Genaro, who he had met while working in Buenos Aires. Miss Tula was so worried about her friend that she relocated to Lima and would regularly visit him in prison. It was believed that the two were in love, but when the media learned of the romance, journalists and photographers would constantly harass her, so much so that she eventually returned to Chile. One of the inmates was a man named Carlos del Mar, who shared Genaro's cell for 22 days. From their conversations, he was able to write a short biography about him, starting from his childhood in Galicia until that infamous day at the Hotel Comercio. In the 1950s, the president of Peru, Prado Ugarteche, pardoned Genaro Ortiz, and he was released from prison despite not having completed his sentence. By this time, his appearance had changed, and barely anyone recognized him. However, when he was seen on a bus, the story was again written about, and a new generation of readers was suddenly fascinated by the crime committed in Hotel Comercio in 1930. One magazine, however, named Caretas, published an article in which they asked the people of Peru to leave him alone, as he had already served his time. Soon other news stories emerged, and again the infamy of Genaro Ortiz became largely forgotten. Nothing much was written about him afterwards, and not much is known about the following years. We do know that he never went back to Spain and never made the fortune that he had always so desired, but how he lived out his remaining years is somewhat of a mystery. Thank you everyone for watching this video on Genaro Ortiz. I hope you found it interesting. Let me know what you thought of the case down below in the comments. If you have any suggestions, also leave them in the comments. This video was narrated by Forgotten Lives, so if you're interested in history and other types of story, be sure to check out my channel, and there is a link below. And thanks again to Briefcase for letting me read on his channel. And anyway, Briefcase will be back in the next video. Thanks.